What's on your list?
Well, I think you mentioned Trump pushing back on some stuff. Uh,
Yes. So Trump gave a speech for Constitution Day, which I didn't know was a thing,
was it always a
yesterday.
thing or is it a new thing? I don't know.
I think it's always a thing. I just didn't realize it. And this speech was, again, like his Mount Rushmore speech, he is getting more clued in and he's getting more focused and specific about the enemy that we are fighting. And I am a reluctant Trump supporter now, I guess you could say. Because he's the only person running who is calling this stuff out, who is specifically, who's aware of the actual. It's like Scott Adams talks about the two movies that are playing, and all of these woke people and NPCs are focused on this, like this. It's not reality. They're easily distracted by whatever propaganda the media puts out and tells them to pay attention to. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, there's this real cultural war happening where all of the values that have formed this country and that made this country great, individualism, equality, all of these values are being eroded and they're being eaten up by this belief system that we were told, hey, it'll never leave the colleges. Remember when it'll never leave the colleges, guys. Now it's certainly left the colleges. It's everywhere now. You've got the Smithsonian Museum putting out critical race theory and social justice ideology talking points, saying that being on time is a function of whiteness, that the nuclear family is a function of whiteness, that meritocracy and hard work and individualism are all functions of whiteness. This is coming from the Smithsonian Museum. It's everywhere. And so Trump, in this speech, and I'd like to, if you want to read a little part of it, but he calls it head on. He uses critical race theory by name. He calls out Marxism by name. So I was standing up and cheering in my seat while I was driving.
Yeah. So I've got some mixed feelings about this, although I like what you're saying about it. Like you're completely 100% on board with what you're saying. But here's just an article about his speech. So during his speech, so I guess Thursday was Constitution Day. I don't know if that's always a thing, but I guess. Um, and here's the headline in CBS News about the speech, and the headline is a good one, captures what happened. Trump blasts 1619 project on role of Black Americans and proposes his own 1776 commission. And this is him talking about uh, talking
Can I
about
read, instead of you reading that part, can I read one just quick paragraph from it that I think from the
sure,
speech
sure if you want to.
for anybody who didn't hear? This is any, and there was more than this, but this was one that I thought would just really hit it. He says critical race theory is being forced into our children's schools.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's being imposed into workplace trainings. It is. And it's being deployed to rip apart friends, neighbors, and families. It is. A perfect example of critical race theory was recently published by the Smithsonian Institution. This document alleged that concepts such as hard work, rational thinking, the nuclear family, and a belief in God were not values that unite all Americans, but were instead aspects of whiteness. This is offensive and outrageous to Americans of every ethnicity, and it is especially harmful to children of minority backgrounds who should be uplifted, not disparaged. He also referenced Martin Luther King in this speech, which I thought was very appropriate because
Yep.
this ideology is opposed to the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah, and he called it child abuse, which I like. He said teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse in the truest sense of those words. So, in this respect, I think Carrie, you and I are in agreement. In this respect, I like what he said about it, and this gets to part of the conversation that hasn't been released yet, but that we had yesterday, Carrie, about like someone calling this stuff out. And I think someone calling this stuff out, especially someone in a leadership position, willing to speak this, um, empowers a lot of ordinary Americans who don't know what to think about this or are afraid to say what they
Right.
think about this. It empowers people to push back in their own lives. They see this and they say, yeah, that this is racist. That's what this is. So I think there's a lot of cultural value to having a leader who will stay explicitly that critical race theory and is racist, and that this is a Marxist movement and all that stuff. I think that's super important. What I what I don't like is
I
that
know what you don't like, I think.
he signed an executive order. I'm going to read here. Mr. Trump signed an executive order, quote, establishing a national commission to promote patriotic education, saying it would be called the 1776 Commission. Now, look, I like the phrase 1776 Commission. It's a great response to the 1619 Project. And if a private organization wanted to start the 1776 Project and push it in, argue that it should be in schools, I think I would be all for it. But I can't put my disagreement with this any better than Michael Bolden from the 10th Amendment Center did. So I'm just going to read what he said. Today is the day that the largest government in the history of the world unconstitutionally mandates that schools unconstitutionally funded by the unconstitutional Federal Department of Education must teach their kids about the constitutional limits on federal power. And this is where I depart with a lot of conservatives, I think, who are all about big government so long as it's a conservative big government. I don't want
Yeah.
I don't want the federal government funding any because, by the way, if the president has the power to mandate the 1776 Commission be taught as in publicly funded schools, what happens when President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decides to mandate something? You just have to
Yes.
be able to think beyond the immediacy of the moment. Just try and look a little bit past tomorrow and think about what happens when someone else holds the reins of that power, because it always happens. And frankly, the hypocrisy of the federal government teaching limits to constitutional power is so distasteful to me that I don't know how you
Here's the
get around
thing.
that in schools at all.
James Lindsay had a good take on this, which I share. I share his opinion on it, which is
Mm-hmm.
that I don't need the government to mandate, quote, patriotic history lessons.
Right.
I would be happy just with truthful history lessons. But
Right.
if I have to choose between patriotic ones and anti-American, racist, sexist, Marxist ones, I guess I'll take the patriotic ones. But you're right.
But you
I
shouldn't
don't
have to
need the
choose.
government, I shouldn't have to choose. It should just be truthful history. Just give us accurate history. I do have a question for you, though, Carter. This is a conversation I mentioned to you Wednesday that I wanted to have with you at some point. I'll just have it now.
Okay, great.
um, uh, so the social justice ideology, as we know, has infiltrated public schools. It's been there for a while, and
Yeah.
it's continuing to infiltrate ones in small communities, in southern communities, in red communities, red
Mm-hmm.
states, and small towns, and people who think it can't hit their small town or their private Catholic school or wherever it is they think their kids are protected.
Yep.
You should be on the lookout for it because it's everywhere. It's going to reach you eventually. And in my small town, they just put out a video, the independent school district, my smallish town, that they're starting to push equity. And they had this whole awful video on equity and implicit bias.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they're pushing this in the whole school district. And I was thinking about trying to do something locally and offering a group for parents or for people in my community who wanted to organize and push back against this, because the social justice warriors have been organizing for decades. Trust me, I was a part of it for decades. They have groups, they have organizations, they have places like the Southern Poverty Law Center that put out propaganda for them. They are organized. They go to the city council meetings. They give templates of letters. here's what to send to city council to get this forced down our throats. Here's what to send to the school board to get this forced down our throats. What are we doing to fight back against this? And so I was thinking about doing a group for specifically for people who wanted to push back against this in the schools in my local community. But my question is this: I don't think philosophically I can have a group that's just against something, that's just opposed to this ideology. I think that people are motivated and are more hopeful when they have something they're fighting for, not just
Yes.
against.
I completely
And
agree with
so
that, by the way.
I
Yeah.
don't cool. So I don't know what kind of patriotic, but I don't know what kind of curriculum, what kind uh, of organizations to support in this area. And if there are
Mm.
parents, if there are people, maybe if there are things that parents should be supporting instead. Like when they go to the school board and they say the 1619 project is a lie. It is racist. It is a racist reimagining of our history. It's an ideological reimagining of our history. I put it that way. It's a Marxist reimagining of our history.
Mm-hmm.
Identity politics based Marxism. What do they then say? Here's what we should be teaching instead.
Right. Well, this is part of the issue
Like,
because the left has owned academic institutions for so long. I mean, probably there's no one alive to have experience who's ever experienced a time in America when the left didn't completely own uh, academic institutions intellectually. Um, there is not there's not there's not apparatus for doing this, for creating curriculum that people can tap into and use, public or private schools. There's not apparatus for creating curriculum that is uh, I'll just say honest and rational. There's only apparatus for creating curriculum that pushes an agenda. In fact, but this is it's going to sound unrelated, but not. So my daughter is homeschooled. Not she was homeschooling. Long story. We're doing a test with the private school, so I lost the battle. She's doing a private school thing right now, but she's home anyway because of COVID. So she's on Zoom, so I can like walk by and see what's being taught. Right? Her science class yesterday for science class. Now, by the way, she's in 6th grade. Uh, she and I have gone over like middle school. I use the ACS curriculum in homeschool, the American Chemical Society curriculum. We've gone over like actual science. So here's where they're starting her in 6th grade. They watched the Lorax in science class. Why?
okay.
So that we could understand the evils, I guess, of like hunting trees to extinction. I don't know. So they watched the Lorax, and today I heard her teacher. I happened to overhear, um, doing something that I realize is very prevalent and is very subtle, and probably no one notices, but it's probably part of every piece of curriculum that's free out there. Because teachers are lazy because teachers work long hours actually when they're not taking off during the summer. So like they don't have a lot of extra time to devote to like here's how I'm gonna teach this thing. They like curriculum that's handed to them, right? So there is curriculum out there that people just get. And what she was doing was anthropomorphizing Earth. The Earth wants balance. The Earth wants this. The Earth wants that. The ecosystems want blah, blah, blah. And that's a very subtle thing. And you can say, well, want is a great way to metaphorically think about it, blah, 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 blah. But it sets up this entire framework of an anthropomorphic mother nature that is then used to garner sympathy and have a non-objective perspective on how humans should interact with nature for the purposes of human flourishing. And, you know, you can anthropomorphize, but not in a science class. In a science class, it's not appropriate to anthropomorphize nature. In your English class, when you're writing poetry, Mother Nature can exist as much as you want, and she can have whatever attributes you want. She can be trans. I don't care what you decide Mother Nature is in English class writing poetry. But in science class, there should be no Mother Nature. This is what the Earth is composed of. This is how physics works. this is how chemistry works. There should not be propaganda. And she's already laying the groundwork for climate change and environmentalist propaganda by anthropomorphizing Earth. I heard her talk about the ecosystems, and the way she was talking about ecosystems was you could hear it being set up like, oh, we're not supposed to disturb it. So this kind of stuff is everywhere. And I think if the people that want to save this country if we get enough of us together, one of the main resources that if I wasn't doing Unsafe Space, I'll tell you right now, the other thing I would be doing, curriculum from elementary school. In fact, I seriously considered starting my own elementary school. I'm glad I didn't, because COVID would have hit and I would have like gone out of business before I could even start. So, but like that's what we need. Curriculum for especially elementary school kids is curriculum that is rational and that is not ideologically based. But we don't have it. We don't
That's
have it.
what, yeah. And so that's the question I'm asking. I saw the chat's going pretty fast, but as it was scrolling, I saw somebody correctly telling me that, what we have to be pushing is individualism. Absolutely.
Yes.
Individualism is the antidote to collectivism of all kinds of collectivism, racism, sexism. We need to be teaching an accurate history of these United States, the good, the bad, the ugly. But we don't need to be indoctrinating people, as critical race theory is indoctrinating children to hate this country and to view everything through the lens of racist social justice Marxism. And yeah. but what they have, my question, I guess, for that person who was saying teach individualism is, what curriculum? When you get down to the nitty gritty of what are they suggesting? The social justice warriors are organized. The New York Times is pushing this 1619 Project curriculum in schools. What curriculum do teachers and parents who are on the side of truth prefer?
Right. And there
I want to
is
know
some
what it's
out there.
called.
Like
I
think
want to
Ron
know
Paul
what to
has
recommend.
some, and like
Yeah.
there is some out there, but it's mostly behind paywalls, and I don't see a lot of like organized big stuff like that. But and I do recognize, I agree with the teacher. So actually, also, I just edited this other video we haven't released with Bradley, Carrie. And one thing that he said, which I really loved, sorry, we're having a little bit of an inside discussion in front of you guys, but he said something that I really loved, which was, all education is indoctrination to some extent. Like you're setting, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but you're setting a framework by which people understand the world, no matter what you teach. And you have to start with a framework of some kind. And I think that's true. You can't teach with zero values. You can't be like, well, math could be true or not true. I'm just going to teach it to you. Like there needs to be a structure. There needs to be at least a skeleton of some assumptions. And I would argue those assumptions can be things like objective reality, reason is a epistemological tool. Like you start with some very basic structures. Maybe the purpose of philosophy being teaching you how to live on Earth, like very basic things, and you work from there. But I think right now we never had to think in those terms, because those were kind of implicit assumptions that we shared throughout history. So when we taught history, we just taught history. We didn't have to think about what the structure, the framework was. And that framework, someone else did think about what the framework was. And they came in with Marxism, usurped the framework, and now we're kind of left going, well, what do we teach? And the answer is, we probably go back to teaching something very similar to what we've been teaching. There may be some differences, but we do so within an explicit framework, and we identify the framework errors that are made in the 1619 Project is a great example, right? You have to identify there's many aspects to the founding of America. What makes America unique? What's different about it? What's similar to other nations prior to America? And what's different about America? What are the unique qualities of America? What's the essence of America? Like what made America America? It's not slavery, right? So you throw slavery out as the essence of America, because that's clearly not what it is. But
that did not make the country unique, is what you're saying. That's been everywhere,
right?
Throughout history. What made the country unique are the things that they are currently denigrating, which is a belief in individual liberty. equality under the law,
Literally no one else
a
has a
belief in.
freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution. Literally today, 2020, zero other country on the planet has the freedom of speech enshrined in their Constitution. Zero. No one. Not the
Yeah.
UK, not your other favorite European country you want to go to. No one has the freedom of speech enshrined in their Constitution. No one. And to look at America and say, oh, well, that individual rights stuff, that's not really, that's not special about America. It's obviously slavery, the thing that everyone did for all of humanity. That's what's special about America. No, no. Um, so I'm all about starting a curriculum project. That it's a lot of work, but it's the right work that needs to be done. And if you're an early education person, that's the project to start working on.
Yeah.
And I actually want to I've been thinking about doing philosophy for elementary and like junior high kids, because you can do some very basic, you don't get into like deep philosophy, but you can do some very basic like thinking skills that can be taught really early that maybe can, and inoculate people from uh, falling prey to some of this crap when they see it later. But okay, that was a lot of stuff.
I actually, while are you going to pull up super chats? Because
Yes, we should.
I'm going to pull up this book. Okay, let's do that. But I'm going to pull up this book to tell you about.
All right, you pull up a book while I'm finding super chats. All right. First one is from Vin. Thank you, Vin. Vin says the pushback against social justice coming from the liberals like yourselves is much more effective than from us right wingers. Keep it up. I'm not a liberal, but Carrie is. But I'm not a right winger either. But I agree with you, Vin. It is more effective when it's coming from the left, because people can relate when someone's like, I'm also a liberal. There's an immediate question of like, oh, we share values somehow, and yet you're pushing back on this. How does that happen? I think that's perfect. Joy, thank you, Joy.
This is the
Oh,
this
go
is
ahead.
the book, real quick. It's called. So I got to meet up with one of our viewers when I was
Mm-hmm.
in Montana, and she is using this book to homeschool. It's called Introductory Logic: The Fundamentals of Thinking Well. She
Okay.
had good things to say about it, and I thought you might like it, Carter, because on the back, guess what it says on the back, the logo for the book?
What?
Think dangerously,
Oh,
which is
nice.
our tagline too. Yeah.
Yes, that's our tagline. I should look at it. I should look at it. Yeah, I have been looking for. Someone asked about logic books, and I have a couple, but I actually don't like. I've got a couple that were aimed at kids that I looked through, and I didn't like them because they were like, "We're going to teach you logical fallacies," but then the examples they used were actually misapplication of logical fallacies. It was like, all right.
Uh,
By the way, the logical fallacy that no one wants you to know about, um, because possibly because it was identified late. It was identified by Ayn Rand, and people hate Ayn Rand. And maybe someone identified it earlier, and she just repeated it. I don't know, but they want you to hate it because it's everywhere and it undermines everything, and you can act like you're being logical and do this with people don't know about it. It's the stolen concept fallacy. It's the fallacy of using a concept that relies on a precedent concept that, like, you can undermining one thing by using a concept, like assuming the truth of a concept to disprove that very concept. Like, so you can do that kind of thing over and over, and people don't notice because they don't notice that concepts are hierarchical and that one relies on another. So you can use a concept to disprove or argue against a concept on which the concept you're using relies. Um, and it's a very, very sneaky, dangerous trick that's used all the time. And we'd all be better critical thinkers if we saw that when it happened.